For years, Pauley Perrette was seen as one of television's safest faces, bright, warm, untouchable. To millions of viewers, she wasn't just an actress, she was comfort itself, showing up every week with the same smile, the same loyalty, the same reassuring presence. But behind that familiar image was a woman carrying fear, silence, and a story that never fully came out when it mattered most. Now at 56, Pauley Perrette is no longer protecting the machine that once protected itself. What she has finally acknowledged forces a very different look at why she disappeared and what it cost her to survive. The woman before the icon. Long before Pauley Perrette became a household name, stability was never part of her life. She was born in New Orleans, but home was never a single place. Her childhood unfolded in constant motion, moving through multiple southern states before eventually landing in the Northeast and then California. By her teenage years, she had already lived in more than a dozen different places. That instability shaped her early understanding of people, power, and vulnerability. You learn quickly how to read a room when you are always the outsider. You learn when to speak and when silence keeps you safe. While many future actors grow up chasing fame, Pauley's interests pointed in a very different direction. She was drawn to crime, not the spectacle of it, but the reasons behind it. She studied criminal justice, sociology, psychology, and criminology, eventually enrolling at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. Her goal was never Hollywood. She wanted answers. Why people hurt others, why violence repeats itself, why systems fail the vulnerable. Those questions stayed with her long before cameras entered her life. During her student years, survival meant doing whatever work was available. She bartended in underground clubs, worked on dinner cruise boats, handed out flyers on roller skates, and immersed herself in New York's alternative subcultures. It was not glamorous, but it was real. She wasn't studying human behavior from a distance. She was living inside it every night. That experience hardened her in quiet ways, even as it left emotional marks that would surface later. Trauma arrived early. As a teenager, she survived sexual assault, something she would not speak about publicly until much later in life. That experience, by her own admission, shaped many of the relationships that followed. It also shaped her empathy. She understood fear not as an abstract concept, but as something that lives in the body long after the danger is gone. Years later, that understanding would turn her into one of Hollywood's most outspoken advocates for victims, even when speaking came at a personal cost. Hollywood was never part of the plan, but desperation and opportunity collided. When she arrived in Los Angeles, she had almost nothing to her name. Acting was not a dream, it was a way to survive. Small roles followed, then television appearances, then films that slowly built credibility. By the time she walked into the audition that would change her life, she was not chasing stardom. She was chasing stability. What she didn't know was that the role about to define her career would also trap her inside a system she would eventually have to escape from. The birth of Abby and the illusion of safety. When Pauley Perrette stepped into the role that would define her public identity, nothing about it felt calculated. Abby Sciuto was not built from market research or tested focus groups. She emerged from instinct, from energy, from a woman who walked into the room without trying to impress anyone and was immediately noticed anyway. The character was introduced quietly, but something about her landed hard with audiences. Abby was different. She was intelligent without arrogance, emotional without weakness, and unconventional without apology. In a genre dominated by rigid authority figures, she felt human. What viewers didn't see was how deeply Pauley invested herself into making Abby feel real. She didn't just memorize dialogue. She studied forensic procedures, lab protocols, and scientific language until it stopped sounding like jargon and started sounding like fluency. Her academic background in criminology gave her an advantage few actors had. She understood the work Abby was doing, she respected it. That respect translated on screen, and audiences responded. As the show gained momentum, Abby became more than a character. She became the emotional center of the series. Fans didn't just like her, they trusted her. Letters poured in from young women who said Abby changed how they saw themselves. Girls who never imagined science as a place where they belonged suddenly did. Over time, this phenomenon earned a name, the Abby effect. Pauley embraced it quietly, setting up scholarships at the very schools she once struggled through, making sure that inspiration turned into opportunity. Behind the scenes, however, the pressure mounted. Being the heart of a long-running network show is not a light burden. Pauley appeared in every episode from the series' beginning, an exhausting pace that left little room for rest. The production schedule was relentless. The expectations were constant. Abby was supposed to be endlessly upbeat, endlessly available, endlessly resilient. And Pauley delivered, year after year. But safety on a set is more than physical structure. It is trust. And over time, that trust began to erode. Small compromises became routine. Discomfort became something to push through. Concerns were minimized. Like many performers in powerful systems, Pauley learned when to stay quiet. The machine rewarded reliability, not resistance. To the public, NCIS looked like stability incarnate. To Pauley, it became something else entirely. A place where fear did not belong, but slowly took root anyway. She stayed because she felt responsible. To the crew, to the fans, to the character who had come to represent something larger than herself. What she didn't yet know was that the illusion of safety would eventually collapse, and when it did, it would take her entire career with it. Fame, pressure, and the first cracks. By the time NCIS became the most watched scripted drama on television, Pauley Perrette was no longer just an actress playing Abby Sciuto. She had become a symbol. Ratings climbed into the tens of millions. Her popularity scores placed her alongside the most trusted figures in American entertainment. To the outside world, this looked like absolute security, professional, financial, emotional. But inside that success was a growing sense of isolation. Fame did not protect her from what followed. In fact, it made everything more complicated. Pauley had always carried unresolved trauma from earlier in her life, including sexual assault as a teenager and abusive relationships in adulthood. Success did not erase those experiences. It layered new pressure on top of them. She was expected to be grateful, cheerful, and unproblematic at all times. Vulnerability was acceptable only when scripted. Off camera, her life became increasingly difficult. Her marriage had already ended in restraining orders and public accusations of abuse. Stalking became a recurring fear. She lived with the knowledge that being visible made her accessible in dangerous ways. Then came the attacks. Outside her home, she was assaulted and threatened with death. Months later, she faced another terrifying encounter while trying to help a homeless person. These were not abstract dangers. They were real, physical, and ongoing. Despite this, she continued to work. She returned to set. She delivered performances that showed no sign of fear or exhaustion. That was part of the unspoken contract. The show had to go on. Behind the scenes, however, anxiety and hypervigilance became constant companions. Therapy became necessary. Silence became strategic. The first cracks inside the NCIS environment were subtle. They did not begin as explosive confrontations. They began as unease, as moments where boundaries felt unclear, as situations where power dynamics made speaking up risky. When something feels wrong in a system this large, the instinct is often to endure rather than challenge. Pauley had already learned that lesson long before Hollywood. Publicly, she remained loyal. She spoke about the show with gratitude. She protected the crew. She protected the institution. But internally, the cost of staying began to outweigh the benefits. Safety, real safety, started to feel conditional. And once fear enters a workplace, it changes everything. By the time the audience noticed that something was wrong, the damage had already been done. The image of harmony was intact. The reality behind it was quietly unraveling. And Pauley Perrette was approaching a breaking point she could no longer outrun. Violence, fear, and the set that wasn't safe. The moment that shattered any remaining sense of security did not come from gossip or creative disagreement. It came from a real incident with real consequences. During production, a dog brought onto the set by a senior cast member attacked a crew member, causing injuries severe enough to require stitches and halt filming. What might have been treated as a one-time accident became something far more serious when the dog was allowed to return to set afterward. For Pauley Perrette, this was not a minor issue. She had a deep personal history with animal rescue and understood animal behavior well enough to recognize risk. More importantly, she understood trauma. A workplace where a violent incident occurs and then repeats the conditions that allowed it to happen does not feel safe. It feels dismissive. She asked for one thing, that the dog not be allowed back on set. That request was denied. From that point forward, fear became operational. Pauley did not simply feel uncomfortable. She felt endangered. The solution imposed was not accountability or prevention, but separation. Her contract was adjusted so that she would no longer be required to appear in scenes with the co-star involved. Production adapted by filming around her, scheduling scenes separately, and relying on editing to preserve the illusion of unity on screen. To viewers, nothing seemed wrong. To those behind the scenes, the fracture was undeniable. What makes this period especially significant is what happened quietly. Pauley filed multiple workplace safety complaints through official channels. These were not emotional outbursts or social media posts. They were formal reports. She followed protocol. She asked for protection. She documented concerns. None of it stopped the situation from escalating. The emotional toll was severe. Pauley later revealed that she required therapy to cope with what she experienced during this time. Fear followed her home. Nightmares replaced rest. Going to work became something she had to endure rather than choose. Yet she continued to show up, protecting the crew and the production while sacrificing her own sense of safety. Silence, settlements, and walking away. When Pauley Perrette finally left the show, many assumed the hardest part was over. In reality, it was only beginning. Leaving did not immediately bring relief. It brought consequences. Once she was no longer bound by the routine of production, the weight of what she had endured surfaced all at once. Fear did not disappear with distance. It followed her into silence. Not long after her exit, Pauley broke that silence in fragments. She did not give interviews. She did not name names. Instead, she spoke in careful, controlled statements, making it clear that her restraint was intentional. She said she was protecting her crew, protecting jobs, protecting people who did not have the power she once did. What she did reveal was enough to unsettle the image of a peaceful departure. She referenced multiple physical assaults. She referenced a powerful machine that kept her quiet while shaping a false narrative about her exit. She made it clear that what happened was not a misunderstanding and not something she could simply move past. The network responded quickly but narrowly. They acknowledged that she had raised workplace concerns and stated that the matter had been addressed internally. What they did not address were the specifics. That silence was not accidental. Behind the scenes, Pauley had already taken steps to protect herself. She hired a private investigator. Safety violations were documented. Records were gathered. The goal was not revenge, it was leverage, and it worked. A private settlement followed. The terms were sealed. The number was never officially confirmed, but industry sources placed it in the multi-million-dollar range. More important than the money was the condition attached to it: silence, a non-disclosure agreement designed to end the story permanently. To the outside world, it looked like closure. To Pauley, it was containment. What people often misunderstand about settlements is that they are not victories. They are trade-offs. Pauley walked away with financial security, but at the cost of her voice. She could not correct the record. She could not tell the full story. She could only live with the knowledge that the truth existed, even if it could not be spoken plainly. Stroke, survival, and what she finally confirms. After walking away from Hollywood, Pauley Perrette did not disappear into comfort. She disappeared into recovery. What few people knew at the time was that her body had been carrying the cost of fear for years. Then, one morning, everything stopped. She woke up unable to feel one side of her body. Her speech vanished. Panic set in. Within hours, doctors confirmed she had suffered a massive ischemic stroke. For a period of time, they did not expect her to survive the day. The recovery was slow and unforgiving. Speech therapy, motor rehabilitation, long stretches of exhaustion where progress felt invisible. What saved her life, according to Pauley herself, was not fame or money. It was her rescue dog. The animal would not stop pawing at her, waking her just in time to seek help. The creature she had once saved ended up saving her back. That moment reframed everything. Survival stopped being abstract. It became personal, intimate, and final. During recovery, something else happened. Pauley stopped running from the truth. She began speaking more plainly, not in accusations but in confirmations. She confirmed she left acting to protect herself. She confirmed she felt unsafe. She confirmed therapy was necessary. She confirmed that silence had been enforced, not chosen. What she did not do was dramatize it. There were no interviews filled with rage, no revenge tour, just clarity. At 56, she no longer frames her story as speculation or misunderstanding. She acknowledges what happened without embellishment. The rumors were not exaggerated. The fear was not imagined. The exit was not a career whim. It was the result of a system that failed to prioritize safety over power. She has made peace with the fact that some details may never be publicly aired. Not because they aren't true, but because survival required restraint. Do you think Pauley Perrette made the right decision by walking away when she did, even at the height of her fame? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more deep dive stories like this.